Drag me to a human rights tribunal. I don't care. Suck my dick.
And I'm not even talking about the potential biological basis of identity, because the idea that identity has no biological basis, that's just wrong. Like factually wrong. So, and we've written a social constructionist, we've written a radical social constructionist view of identity into the law. But even worse than that, we've gone beyond social constructionism, because Piaget was a constructionist, into just pure whim. Your identity can be at any moment what you assume that it's going to be. That's not a tenable solution. There's nothing about that proposition that's reasonable.
An article that appeared in the Daily Mail recently by Rachel Johnson states, "A woman on trial for rape? Really? No. She was born male, but that's a secret because even our courts are gripped by misgender madness." I will have a link to the article in the description, but the article goes on to say, "Woman, 26, appears in court charged with raping man twice." I thought this was a traffic stopper of a news story too. How did that work, I wondered. Details, though, were oddly scant. All there was to know was that a Katie Brannon, 26, of South Shields, Tyne and Ware, allegedly carried out the attacks in January. She was granted bail, had to observe a curfew, and was not allowed to enter licensed premises, and that's all. I allowed my mind to run wild. Had a woman drugged some poor lad she picked up in a boozer and forcibly had her wicked way with him? As it turns out, it wasn't like that at all. Brannon was born male, but we readers weren't allowed to know that. It's not that this detail wasn't important or forgotten. It was omitted in the moral panic around both privacy and misgendering, the progressive cause de nos jours. To call someone by the wrong title is considered verbal assault and even bigotry.
The terminology is messy in the extreme. First of all, with regards to gender identity is not a spectrum. It's a modified bimodal distribution. And if you're making law, you don't get to muck around with the words. You have to use the right words. And so it's a modified bimodal distribution because almost everyone who has a biological identity of male or female identifies as male or female. It's 99.7%. And you could argue that that's a little tighter than it would be if society was more accepting of gender variation, let's say. But even if it went down to 99%, which would be an increase of what? Well, it would be almost an order of magnitude increase. You still have the overwhelming number of people whose gender identity matches their biological sex.
It goes on to say, and it's largely fear of misgendering that has led the courts perpetrating and the press reporting a faked fact that women can and do rape men, rather than telling us the literal truth. Last week, the courts decided to wave aside inconvenient aspects of biology and law. Rape is defined as intentionally penetrating another person with your penis against their will, and only males have penises, because they were dealing with something far more important than truth, or indeed statute. And I have to add here that depending on where you are, which country or which part of a country, rape is defined differently. It's not as limited to this description in this article.
And you can't just play mucky games with your legislative terminology. It gets people in trouble. So it's not a spectrum, and that's that. It's a modified bimodal distribution, and there are obviously exceptions, and I never argued once in the videos that I put out, despite how people reacted to them, that there weren't exceptions. Of course there are exceptions, and if you look at temperament, for example, the big differences between men and women are agreeableness and neuroticism. Fundamentally, women are about half a standard deviation more agreeable. That's compassion and politeness. And they're about half a standard deviation higher in negative emotion. And that's cross-cultural, by the way, and it also accounts for the reasons why women are about 3 to 4 times more likely to suffer cross-culturally from depression and anxiety, whereas men are more likely to be aggressive in prison and to drink. And low agreeableness is actually the best predictor of incarceration among men. Those are solid biological differences, but if you try to segregate men and women using only those 2 dimensions, you only get it right about 75% of the time. So there's a substantial overlap, but that still doesn't mean that it's not a spectrum. And the idea that there are no biological differences between men and women is such a preposterous claim that I can't even believe that we would ever have that discussion.
The article goes on. They were dealing with a situation where a man identified as a woman, and his right to identify as a woman trumped our right to know the actual facts as opposed to the alternative facts. This case exposes like no other the stupid way our courts and our parliament, and I'm afraid the press, are being sucked into prevailing moral panic over misgendering, the cause that's fast overtaken feminism as the go-to civil liberties issue of our times. It was this panic that prevented us from reporting or reading that Katie Brannon was born a man and had a penis, two facts completely central to this case. You have to know them, otherwise, think about it, the charge wouldn't be rape. Even so, we're not allowed to call a spade, even though this is the only way you can make any sense at all of this man bites dog story. It's getting even more bonkers as there are moves afoot to make gender a simple and swift matter of choice requiring no bureaucracy at all.
And then you can stack on top of biological sex, gender identity, virtually perfect match. Then gender expression, almost everyone who is biologically male or female, who identifies as biologically male or female, expresses themselves as male or female. And then the vast majority of them have a sexual orientation that's in keeping with their, in traditional keeping with their biological sex, gender identity, and gender expression. So now we have a law that says those are independent. Guess what? That's not the definition of independence.
MPs are considering a private member's, no pun intended, bill to allow folk to become whatever gender they feel like, i.e. men who feel like women can insist that they use ladies' bathrooms or serve their sentence for rape in women's prison if they so desire. The absolute farrago of fashionable fruitcakery must stop. On Crime Watch the other day, the public was asked to look out for Lisa Hawkswell, described as a woman convicted of 2 rapes and 7 indecent assaults, which police called horrendous crime. This led to a feature in a broadsheet bewailing the rise in female sexual violence, despite the fact that 98% of sexual crime is carried out by men, and that Lisa Hawkswell is a part-time transvestite man. In our anxiety not to offend the misgendered minority, we are allowing misleading language and bullying groupthink to take root and flourish in public life. In our anxiety to bend over backwards to grant the misgendered the inalienable right to be called whatever they like, we have lost our precious ancient rights as English subjects to use the correct language to describe the actual truth. Can a woman rape a man? No, it is not biologically or legally possible. Only a man calling himself a woman can. Nobody else will say it, I will, and I'll see you in court if it comes to that. There is such a thing as sexual dimorphism, and Jordan Peterson explains here the difference between the sexes.
Men have wider jaws, men are taller, they have broader shoulders, women have more endurance in endurance sports, women have a subcutaneous layer of fat, the shape is different, the way the arms are placed is different, the voice is different. And that's just gross morphology. I'm not even talking about genitalia. And then you can look at microstructures. There's differences between men and women at every level of the human microstructure, from the cellular all the way up to the social. So what in the world are we talking about? What's going on here? It's crazy.
This train of thought by the likes of esteemed Professor Jordan Peterson, not a real shocker, is being echoed even in the feminist community. As we'll see on this article from Heat Street, feminist author Adichie slammed as transphobic for saying women and trans women are different. Nigerian-American feminist author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is being bashed for having the audacity to say that women and transgender women live different lives and they shouldn't be conflated. When people talk about are trans women women, my feeling is trans women are trans women, said Adichie, who argued that women who were assigned as female at birth did not have the same experiences growing up as transgender women who were assigned male and only transitioned to becoming women later in life. It's not about how we wear our hair or how we have a vagina or a penis, continued Adichie. It's about the way the world treats us. And I think if you've lived in the world as a man with the privileges that the world accords to men and then sort of change gender, it's difficult for me to accept that then we can equate your experience with the experience of a woman who has lived from the beginning as a woman and who has and who has not been accorded these privileges that men have. I don't think it's a good thing to talk about women's issues being exactly the same as the issues of trans women, because I don't think that's true, she said. Outraged social justice warriors took to Twitter to express their disgust and dismay at her opinions, calling on her to fix her politics for speaking what many women are thinking. And after receiving much criticism on the internet, she goes on to say this is not to exclude trans women from feminism or to suggest that trans issues are not feminist issues or to diminish the violence they experience, a violence that is pure misogyny, she wrote, but simply to say that acknowledging differences and being supportive are not mutually exclusive, and that there is space in feminism for different experience. Now we move into peak trans territory, where radical feminists, sometimes called TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists, have had enough of the male to female identification of trans women and aren't having any of this. Very simply put, they feel that people born with penises are intruding into spaces that have been hard fought and won by feminists. They see trans women as men. On this post from the Purple Sage, a lesbian feminist gender abolitionist blog, they pick a bone with one noteworthy SJW feminist. It says, "How charming. On International Women's Day, both men and women around the world talked about women's status in society and how to end the problems we still face, such as the wage gap and male violence against women. Danielle Moscato, a fully intact male who identifies as a woman, tweeted the following message in honor of his fellow women. Some women have penises. If you're bothered by this, you can suck my dick." As you can guess, these RADFEMs take a dim view of not just men who identify as women, but especially men who appear as men identifying as women. Trans women and men's rights trans activist Theron Meyer has a big problem with Danielle Moscato, but not as much as you can imagine does Magdalene Burns, a popular YouTuber who is criticizing both.
Us TERFs get upset about quite regularly.
Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I hear that someone is transgender, I immediately want to see how they look and check out their transition and see where it's at.
People can dress how they want, as far as I'm concerned, as long as they don't lie about reality.
So let's have a look at Miss Danielle Moscato.
So this will be interesting.
Can't wait to see her. I like her last name, Moscato. Ooh, I like white wine. I like sweet white wine. That's so feminine. Ooh.
Theron, are you alright there? You sound a bit like you're having a mental break.
Let's have a very warm welcome to Danielle.
Theron is overcompensating because Danielle Moscato is representing the transgender community and making no effort to be feminine.
Sorry, what?
Flicking the hair.
I have to admit that I'm a big fan of Magdalene Burns' YouTube video. While not agreeing with much of radical feminism, she makes precision attacks against the subjects that she opposes while keeping her videos massively entertaining. But don't take my word for it.
How is everybody doing?
Confused.
Qualified silliness.
You're Danielle. Oh, okay.
It's because he's so freaked out by what he said.
You can move closer if you'd like. I'm going to be giving some stuff away.
Actual classic.
And if you want it, it's easier for me to give it to you if you're up here.
Will it be your masculinity? Because that seems like it might be a good thing to give away.
But no. Transgender identity isn't about masculine and feminine stereotypes. It's so much more than that.
Sorry, choking on some cum.
Well, that escalated quickly.
Now, let's be fair, this clip is from a year ago. So let's check out her Twitter and see if there's been any progress since. Nope, still looks like that overly friendly uncle of mine that I have these vague, suppressed childhood flashbacks of for reasons I cannot recall.
I really don't know what to say about that. But moving on.
Both Theron Meyer and Magdalene Burns have issues with trans woman Danielle Moscato, but for entirely different reasons, as is obvious. Some of the confusion caused by misgender madness is summarized quite brilliantly by Professor Jordan Peterson.
So the pronoun problem becomes very, very problematic, very, very rapidly. You can see that with the acronym growth in the LGBT community, which has to fractionate, will continue to fractionate, because none of those groups are homogenous in any but the most trivial of senses. So that's a big problem. Which pronouns? Okay, so what sort of problem is that? Well, In New York State, for example, they've already more or less passed into law the proposition that there are pretty much as many pronoun descriptors as there are people claiming identities. And so on Facebook, for example, which is a good example of, say, common parlance, there's about 71 different gender identities already recognized and no agreed upon lexicon to represent any of them. And so the issue there is, well, what stops the infinite multiplication? And the answer to that is whim. And that's actually written into the law because the law already states that your identity is predicated on your subjective. And I would say whim, and that's also wrong. It isn't.
Jordan Peterson has become a hero for free speech rights and is targeting only the compulsory use of gender pronouns, whereas the TERFs object not only to the use of certain pronouns, but more importantly the right of men to call themselves women, on a whim or any other way they choose to do so.
Seriously, I feel like I'm living in an alternate universe when I see news outlets cover this story with text referring to this person as she.
Do you know what? That's exactly how I feel every time I see rapes that are committed by male transgender women and murders that are committed by male transgender women being reported as if they were committed by women. And I see those every day.
And then right next to it, a picture of this person with like a fully fledged astroturf of a neckbeard carpet.
This is what we were telling you would happen, and you refused to listen because you wanted your identity to be validated.
It's like, okay, cool prank internet, you can stop now, lolsies.
Here it is happening in front of you now, exposing your bullshit.
A never-ending strange world of alliances between groups often opposing each other. Far-right religious and political people opposing trans-inclusive laws such as use of public restrooms do share the hoped-for end result, as do some radical feminists, while their admirers obviously bothered by the lack of effort put into a male-to-female transition by some. Magdalene Burns is against anyone born with a penis, no matter how hard they work at how they appear, and has no sympathy for any argument that leads to men calling themselves women.
The tragic transgender circumstance of having one's body be in conflict with one's sense of self.
The smallest violin is playing for this dude.
But it also makes a mockery of the effort and dedication that trans people have to put in to transform and overcome their physical reality.
This is a mockery of the effort and dedication us Londoners put in to overcoming physical reality and become white South Africans.
It scares me that people are willing to betray with their words the obvious reality that they see in front of their eyes for the sake of political correctness.
The obvious reality is that I am a white South African because I have made all this effort.
The power of political correctness as a psychosocial phenomenon,
These politically correct bastards,
and as it manifests itself in the curious case of Donnell Moscato, truly scares me.
South African.
I'm gonna call out this leftist bullshit for what it is.
And I'm gonna call out your bullshit.
Call me a transphobic bigot all you want.
Here's the calling out bullshit in 2017.
Drag me to a human rights tribunal. I don't care. Suck my dick.
I hope you were able to enjoy this video. While not being as smart or as entertaining as any of the people shown within it, it is possible that you may be moved to hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, join us on social media, or even support through our new Patreon page. All links in the video description. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to watch this video, and please do check the other videos on this channel. Goodbye.